The Vedantic knowledge is all about self knowledge. The base of the Vedanta is all about knowing the true self. Knowing the true self will bring the true composure, will bring the enduring peace within all of us. Because if you see, life is all about a summary of different events. Different things happen in our life. And we all are always aiming at happiness, balance, prosperity, everything from the outside. We all want to be happy always. Correct? Always seeking the Ananda. Paripurna Ananda. That is why we are always working and trying to do different things and depending upon the things from the outside. Ananda Prapti. This is what we all want. But that Prapti, what we are trying to do is basically we are trying to depend upon the external objects to make us happy or bring happiness. So that is where the struggle is out, right? The true composure, because if you deal with the worldly objects will not bring always conducive things to us. So then it is a question of incessant happiness, how that happiness will come. So when one starts thinking about this, it will become clear that I cannot depend upon the worldly objects for making that incessant happiness. When we go deeper and deeper, we will get the wisdom that I myself is the embodiment of that happiness. My inherent nature is happiness. Myself is the substratum of the happiness. So that is where Vedanta talks about the self-knowledge. Self-knowledge as the base. And knowing the self is the complementary aspect of the spiritual realization. In spiritual realization, when we say God realization, when we say self-realization, Brahma Sakshatkaram or Atma Sakshatkaram or Ishvara Sakshatkaram or Mukti or Moksha, all these topics talk about only the self. And knowledge about that self is the base of everything. And that is the complementary principle or complementary aspect or a complementary dimension of the spiritual realization. So what happens when one starts knowing the self, when one starts thinking about the true nature, who am I? Who really am I? Am I this body? Am I this mind? Am I this intellect? Am I this senses? When we start looking at this, it is easily understandable that I cannot have the mere identity as a body, I cannot have the mere identity as a mind, etc. And the real I, the real self is possessing this. When we say my body, I am not the body, I am having a body, or I am enclosed with a body, but the real I is something different. So when we start doing the introspection into who truly am I, one will be able to reach this state, the Swarupa. So Swarupa, the Nija Swarupa, the true nature. And that is where the equanimity will also come. When one realizes this self, equanimity is ensured. So one way we can say, bringing equanimity in life, for bringing equanimity in life, self-knowledge should be the basis. Or we can say equanimity as the expression. When one says there is equanimity in this person, or when one says I do have the equanimity, I am able to cope up with different situations in life, we can say equanimity as the expression of self-knowledge. Bhagavan gives this wisdom to Arjuna. So you should have the titiksha. You should endure it. You should have a brave endurance, because things are coming in life and going. So you should not get carried away with the things, because you are beyond this. That is where the entire second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita talks about Sthita Prajnatvam, Samatvam, Yogam. Maybe in different contexts we can see Bhagavan says Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Yoga is all about having Samatvam in life, equanimity in life. Or Bhagavan again says in a different context in second chapter, Sthita Prajnatvam. And again in a very practical way, second chapter, 50th sloka, Yoga Karma Sukhausha. So that is the output of the yoga is basically you should not get affected. Karma Sukhausha. You cleverly manage the karma in such a way that you are not getting affected, you are not getting binded. Again in another context, if I remember correctly, second chapter, 48, I think, 48th verse. Yes, Yogastu Kuru Karmani Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya Siddhya Asiddhyo Sama Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyade. Again, Samatvam Yoga Uchyade. Samam. Also, Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya. Don't get entrapped with the objects. So this is a practical philosophy, because mental balance is needed for all of us, right? When you say mental balance is all about remaining unaffected by the high and low. Remaining unaffected by the different experiences that we encounter in life. How that is possible? One has to go above the dundvam, dualities. When we are operating from the plane of world, it is quite obvious that this dundvam will happen. And we cannot run away from the plane of objects. So how will we transact? That is where Bhagavan says, this is a kushalata. Dexterity in action is yoga. There needs to be certain cleverness that you need to have when we operate in the plane of the world. You have to transact at the end of the day, right? You cannot run away. So how will you manage this? Transactions you cannot forget. You cannot run away from the transactions. So still you can do the transactions, but you are not getting affected. Your mental equipoise is there. You are very clear about the true self. You are clear about who is doing the action. And who you are also clear about what is enabling me to do or what is enabling me to perform the actions. But my higher goal is basically yogam, because karmam as karma yoga. If you see yogam, the root yoga comes from the term yuj. Yuj means to unite, to join. To join what? To unite with what? To unite your individual self with the ultimate reality. And where is that reality? That reality is my own true nature. So when we do things in life, when we operate in this world, always have the connection with the higher self, with the higher self, with the true self. The union of individual self, when we say self, now in this context we can consider the self as the intelligence mixed with the other associations of the Prakriti. That includes the mind, the vasanas, the influence of the body, mind, intellect, senses, the other influences. So when we say the self with the real intelligence around these layers of the Prakriti, and in the context of yogam, what we are trying to understand is basically decouple these layers, decouple these concentric layers which are around the true self. Decoupling meaning what? Decoupling is all about knowing, because these layers are not the reality, they cannot be the truth. When one gets this understanding, these layers will vanish. These layers will still exist, but you will not depend upon these layers. So ultimately, the inner truth, you will realize that that truth is the same truth which is pervading everywhere. This is the true essence of yoga. Yogam is all about chittavritti nirodham and tadadrishta swarupe avasthan. Chittavritti nirodham meaning it is not something like you kill all the thoughts, etc. You are going to the level of understanding that where these thoughts are emanating, where these thoughts are surviving, from where these thoughts are coming, from where these thoughts are, or where it is surviving, where it is getting sustained, where it is emanating, sustaining, and perishing. Obviously, it cannot be in the mind or in the intellect. So when one understands this, that is the chittavritti nirodha. It is not about suppressing the thoughts which are coming. When one understands what is the enabler of these thoughts, what is the real substrate, at that point of time you are with that reality. This is the true essence of yoga. Ability to maintain a balanced and composed mind, composed state of mind while we are engaging in different transactions, different actions. And this is the real peace. This is the real swasthata in life. Irrespective of the external circumstances, recognizing the peace within. For that you need to know the self. You need to know the true reality. You need to know who truly are you. Ishavasya Upanishad in one way says, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kimcha jagatyam jagat. The unity of divine. That is what Ishavasya Upanishad says. So Ishavasya Upanishad is ultimately declaring that this divinity is pervading in everything, and that is pervading in you also, right? That is not mentioned. Ishavasyamidam sarva. Everywhere this Ishwaran is pervading. So it is implied that you are also the same reality. And with this understanding, you need to see everything You need to understand this divine presence in everything. When this understanding comes, what happens? We will be able to live a balanced life. You will be able to remain engaged in everything without attachment. That is where Bhagavan says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. This is an art. Remain engaged in everything, but at the same time don't get attached to anything. In another way, Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya. You renunciate. You don't get attached to anything. Not in the literal sense. Not in the literal sense of abandoning things in life and run away. But it is all about transcending the material attachments and the desires. Go above those. Overcome those. When I say overcoming is all about overcoming the ego. Overcome the ego and unite with that self. Realize the self's unity with that divine. So when we have this understanding, the dvandam, the ups and downs, the what is the right word? The dvandam is all about two sides of a coin. Good, bad, heat, cold, pleasure, pain. When we know our true nature, and that true nature is the akarta, and that true nature is not having any definitions on this, what is good, what is bad, because that true nature is non-dual. And I am that true nature. So then where is the dvandam getting affected? I cannot get affected by these dualities. So one should be able to overcome the dvandva. And the nature of the self, that is what the Shastram says. You are not different from that. Tattvamasi. Srimad Bhagavata says, Vadanti tat tattvavidaha yat tattvam jnanam advayam brahmedi paramatmedi bhagavanidi satyadi. That truth is called in different names. Called as Brahman, Ishwaran, Paramatma, Brahman, Atman. The Mahavakyam says, Tattvamasi, you are that. That self is beyond the physical existence. That self is eternal. There is no birth, death to that self. And that self is immutable. In the beginning, during our dhyanam, we use the Narayana Kavajastotra. Harir Vidadhyan Mama Sarva Raksham Nestahangri Vatma Padagendra Vrishti. So Hari is the immutable. That Lord is immutable. That Lord is eternal. So with this knowledge, one should be able to synthesize, or when I say synthesize the knowledge and actions in life. Karma should get converted to karma yoga. And the application of the knowledge ultimately should be paved as jnana yoga. Bhagavan in Gita again says only two ways. Dividohi. Jnana yogena sankhyana, karma yogena yogina. So apply this knowledge, ultimately the paths will converge. Jnanam, karmam, only yogam will exist. What is yogam? Yogam is the realization of the self. Yogam is the state of equanimity. So practically when we say yoga karmasu kaushalam, you should not get affected by the karmam, because the unpleasant things can happen, pleasant things can happen. Ragam, dvesham, kartrutvam, bhoktrutvam. Attachment, aversion, enjoyership, doership. We cannot do any transaction without this. So what one should do? One should not accumulate these things. Always be aware of the ultimate reality. Maintain detachment. So detachment is all about not gathering these stains. Attachment, aversion, enjoyship, devotion. Not accumulating the attachment, aversion, enjoyship, doership from the results of action. This is yoga. So that way, the summation after doing a karma is equal to 0, because you are not carrying anything or you are not adding anything on the top of. So Bhagavan again in Gita says that such a person is called as Muni, right? Tidhadir Muni, Muni Ruchyade. And in the third chapter, Siddha Prajnan is also called as Atmanyev Atmana Tushta. In the second chapter, Sthita Prajnastad Uchyade, the one who derives energy from within, one who is aware of the self, the one who is deriving energy from that source. Because that person is clear about that divine power as the source of all actions, that divine power as the ultimate agent beyond all the actions. I am just acting. I am just an agent of that divine. When I say I am the agent, this body, through this body, this Vyavaharam is happening. But who is the real source of all action? That divine. So that divine as the ultimate source of all knowledge and perceptions. Kenovishat says, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Manoyat Vajoha Vajam Sav Pranasya Prana Chakshusha Chakshur Adimuchyadi. The direct experiencer. Vajoha Vajam Sav Pranasya Prana. The Pranan of the Pranas, the Pranan of the Pancha Pranas, the word of the words, the mind of the minds. The one who realizes the real experiencer. Such a person is a Dhiran. Before we get into Bhajagovindam, I thought I will set the context. The context is all about self-knowledge as the basis of everything. Self-knowledge as the dimension of the spiritual progress. Equanimity as the direct yardstick of the self-knowledge, the realization, not getting affected by anything. With that, let us start the verse number 24. I hope you all have the book, Bhajagovindam, 24th verse. Tvai mai chanyatraiko Vishnu vyartham kupyasi maya sahishnu bhava samachitta sarvatratvam vanchasi achirat yedi vishnutvam Bhajagovindam Bhajagovindam Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate. So, Samachitta Sarvatra Tvam. Toi Mai Chanyatraigo Vishnu Vyartham Kupyasi Maya Sahishnu Bhava Samachitta Sarvatra Tvam Vanchasi Achirat Yidi Vishnu Tvam. So here, in me and you, and in everything, who is pervading? The Vishnu is pervading. The same Vishnu dwells in everything, in me, in you, in everything. So if the same Vishnu is pervading everywhere, is there a question of you getting angry or impatient? These all are meaningless. What you need to do? Because you need to have tolerance in life. In life, the circumstances can come in any way. In our dhyana, we mentioned that Yadahi Bhagavan eva vastuda sada sachel satyena anena na sarve yandu nasham upadrava. Let that Lord protect me from every asat, whatever is good, whatever is bad. Let me not get affected by everything. So if the same Vishnu is pervading, if the same Lord is pervading in everywhere, then it is meaningless that we becoming angry and impatient. So you cultivate bhava samachitta sarvatra tum. You please cultivate the equanimity always. So here when we say Vishnu, vyapnodi iti Vishnu, the intelligence that is pervading everywhere. It is very easy for us to relate. If you go to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yogam, Bhagavan says, Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. Kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yattat jnanam madam mama. This is my matam. This is what I say. This is what it is. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. In every kshetra, all bodies, all manifestations are kshetram. And I am the kshetrajnan, hey Arjuna. The knower of the field is only one. The true observer, the true experiencer within every body is only one. Because everybody is having consciousness, and I am that consciousness, and that consciousness cannot be different. That consciousness that perceives and experiences throughout the body, and it cannot be different from different kshetra. And I am the only one kshetrajna. Here Bhajagovindam also says the same Vishnu is pervading everywhere. Ishavasya Upanishad says Ishavasya sarva. Srimad Bhagavatam says Atma Vasyamidam Vishwa. And in Jnana Vijnana Yogam, again Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita says, hey Arjuna, please understand that I am the common thread. Matta paradaram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya. Mai sarvamidam prodam sutre maniganaya. So I am the ultimate reality. I am the source of everything. I am the supreme principle that is underlying this universe. So what you need to do? The takeaway to us is bhava samachitta sarvatra. Have this equanimity in life, and that equanimity comes through what? Comes through the self-knowledge. So nityam samachittada. Again, if you go back to 13th chapter, Bhagavan says in the verse number 10, 13:10, 11. 13:10. Nityam cha samachittatvam ishtanishtoba bhaktishu. Always treat everything equally. Maintain a undisturbed mind, unwavering mind, regardless of all the circumstances. Remain centered. Remain in that self. Remain centered meaning there you get balance, regardless of external failures and successes. So what you need? You need bhava samachitta sarvatratum, with the understanding that the same consciousness is pervading everywhere and you are also part of that. And your identity is that Vishnu, the higher self. Verse number 25. Shatrau Mitre Shatrau mitre putre bandhau mam kuru yatnam vigraha sandhau sarvasminna vivashyatmanam sarvatrolsrija bhedajnanam Bhajagovindam Bhajagovindam Govindam Bhajamudhamade Shatrau Mitre Putre Bandhau Mam Kuru Yatnam Vigraha Sandhau Sarvasminnabi Pashyatmanam Sarval Sosraja Sarvatrotsraja Bhedajnanam. So don't make an effort to create conflict, create yaps, unwanted arguments with enemies, unwanted efforts to create conflict with mitram, putra, bandhau, with friends, sons, relatives, etc. So don't take a physical, literal meaning here. See the self in all beings and abandon the notion of differences. Differences are there. Differences are at the plane of transactions. Differences are at the plane of names and forms. There are differences because that is why individuality comes into picture. But see the self in all beings and abandon the notion of differences, because you cannot just stamp it like everything is different. Difference is there at the plane of transactions. Difference is there at the plane of vyavahara. But in the Atma Jnanam, there is clarity that the self is there in all beings. And abandon the differences at your inner plane. So how will one physically or practically do or practically maintain the equanimity and impartiality in relationship? This is a question, right? You talk about see the difference at transaction and don't see the difference at your inner plane. How will you do that? So that is where you need to be non-attached. See, non-attachment to the conflict, right? Interaction should be non-attached. You may have a difference in viewpoint, etc., right? You can put those perspectives across, but don't get attached to the conflict. See, there is also a saying in management realm that you differ upon the viewpoint rather than attacking a person. You disagree with the perception. You can put your viewpoint logically, but don't get attached to it. Don't create a conflict. Don't create offshoots out of those discussions. You share the perspective with logic. Interactions should happen, right? But interaction should be non-attached. And again, see the self in everything. Recognize the same divine. Sarvasminnavi Pashyatman. Recognize the same divine self in everything, irrespective of their role, irrespective of the relationships that you carry with. So this practice will help us to transcend the superficial differences, because the differences are there and these differences are superficial, because at the plane of transaction these differences need to be there. So, and again, these are our notional differences, superficial differences. So what one has to do? One has to foster a deeper sense of unity, deeper sense of compassion, and abandon the notion of differences, right? You are transacting, you are a boss, you are a master, you are a professor, you are teaching the students, you are imparting knowledge. Leave it there. Don't bring the sense of difference, don't bring the plurality into into your inner plane. So these sense of difference are coming out from the plurality, from the dvandam. And this dvandam happens out of what? This is born out of ignorance, this is born out of ajnana. So when we get rid of the vibhakti, the notion that I am doing due to me, it is happening due to me, I am the agent, etc. When the vibhakti comes down when you know the true self. That is where the bhakti will start growing. So vibhakti nashayaja bhakti yoga. So what happens when one starts bringing down the vibhakti, the bhakti will happen. So likewise, the whole universe you will be able to appreciate that it is born out of one truth. So you cannot afford to have hatredness, you cannot have anger with the other things, because this there should be nirdvandutvam. Bhagavan in the second chapter says in the 45th verse, nirdvandutvam, 45 says that Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistregunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto Niryogakshema Atmavan. One says you need to come out of the dualities and you need to have the Sattvagunam in you, and you should be free from the acquisitions and the mode of preservation. You are otherwise the embodiment of the completeness. The self is the embodiment of Purnatvam. With that knowledge and energy, you act. You need to act with that knowledge and with that conviction. Correct. So now, with that, let us go to the next verse, verse number 26. Kamam krodam lobham moham tyaktvatmanam pashyati soham atmajnana vihina mudha te pachyante naraga nigudha Bhajagovindam Bhajagovindam Govindam Bhajamudhamade. Kamam, Krodam, Lobham, Moham. So leave the desire, leave the Krodam, anger, leave the greed, Lobham, and the delusion. Understand these four are the enemies to know the self. Those who have no knowledge of Atman, Bhagavan says here that Atmajnana Vihina Mudha. Those who have no knowledge of the Atman, no knowledge of the self, are fools, and they pachinde naraganaguda, and they suffer in the life. That they suffer in the hell. When we say hell is here only. They are in the samsara. So these four thieves are there. Who are the four thieves? Kamam, Krodam, Lobham, Moham. So what Acharya Swami says, they are the Jnana Ratna Apaharam. So they prevent you to reach the goal of Jnana Sakshatkar. What are those? Kamam, Krodam, Lobham, Moham. So when the mind is stained, when we say Kamam, Krodam, Lobham, Moham, the four stains which I mentioned before. Raga, Dvesha, Kartrutva, Bhoktrutva. So when the mind is stained with this dirt, where is the question of you experiencing the self? The self cannot be realized. The self cannot be experienced. Atmajnana vihina muda te pachyante naraka niguda. So when we say naraka and all, please understand that when our mind is clouded with all these distractions, how one can transcend that mind and see the self. When the mind is shrouded with the conditioned knowledge of the objects, without the knowledge of the reality behind those objects, your evolution gets stopped. That is the literal, I would say, the implied meaning, not you will go to hell and all. So when you cloud your mind with all these stains, where is the possibility that you can experience the reality behind the mind? Because the mind has to be purified, and the self is not something which can be objectified. The mind has to be so pure that then the seamless journey to the self will happen. Because this is not a vastu to be experienced. So when the mind is pure, the reflection of the self is also pure. When the mind is pure, again, the self is pure, the self is clear. The self is getting reflected as it is. So it means what? That is the state of a pure mind. And there is no difference between the mind and the self. You are there. Verse number 27. Geyam Gita Nama Sahasram Deyam Sripadi Rupamajasram Neyam Sajjana Sange Chittam Deyam Dina Janaya Chavittam Bhajagovindam Bhajagovindam Govindam Bhajamudhamadem. Geyam Gita Nama Sahasram. Regularly sing Gita Nama Sahasram. When we say Gita Nama Sahasram, the glory of the God, you need to sing. That glory of the God is presented in all scriptures, as in Srimad Bhagavata, in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in a simple way, the Vishnu Sahasranama. Dhyayam Sripadi Rupam Ajasram. Always meditate upon the form of that Lord, that Adi Purushan, that Vishnu, that Mahavishnu. Dhyayam Sripadi Rupam Ajasram. So Bhagavan meditated upon the form of Adi Purusha, Mahavishnu, the Lord of Lakshmi, right? And you make every effort to take your mind towards the company of good. Neyam Sajjana Sange Chitta. Ensure that your mind is purified on a daily basis towards the company of good people, good, noble people, holy people. Deyam Dina Janaya Chavittam. And you also share the wealth with poor and needy. You lead a life of compassion. So what are the four things? First is Swadhyaya, the self-study, the self-reflection, the scriptural studies, reading, chanting, reflecting, understanding. Through Vishnu Sahasranama, when you chant Vishwam Vishnu Vashatkaro Bhuta Bhavya Bhavat Prabhu, understand the Lord who is pervading everywhere as the universal consciousness. Have that understanding. That depth should be there when you chant. You need to see that Adi Purushan everywhere when you chant. All the Visheshana of the Lord, right? If you see Mahabhuto, Mahagarto, everything, right? All are very profound. See that. See the profoundness of the Lord, and how that comes through this Swadhyayam, through the reading, chanting, Upasana. Also, do the Yama Niyamadigal, continuous yama niyama, because the mind will always get distracted and mind will go after these things. So bring the mind back. Have sadhyayam daily. Have the process of continuous refinement, continuous learning. Purify the mind through this, right? Through the conscious actions, and align with your deeper goals. And what is the deeper goal in life? Deeper goal in life is the realization of the self. Dhyayam Sripadi Rupam Ajasram. To meditate upon the Lord, see that Lord continuously everywhere. When we say to see the Lord, have that deeper connection with that reality. Devotion in that, deeper connection in that reality. And that reality is your true nature also, right? So, when we have this awareness in us, our actions will also get purified, because our connection with that truth, the devotion with that truth, devotion with that higher nature, that itself is a purification. Bhakti itself is a purification. So what next? Neyam Sajjana Sanghe Chittam. To be engaged, involved in the company of good people, virtuous people who will help us in the upliftment and maintain the righteous path, the Dharma Margam. Dheyam Dina Janaya Chavittam. Practice charity, practice compassion. Let those be a part of your life. When you say charitable giving, it doesn't mean that you need to spend millions of money or do CSR and all those, right? It can be through different ways. Uplifting can happen through different ways. Swami Vivekananda says, a householder digging tanks by planting trees, by establishing the houses for men and animals, by making roads, building bridges, goes towards the same goal as a greatest yogi. As a grihastha ensure that you are also contributing towards the welfare of others. Charitable giving is all about that. Have a compassion in everything that you do. Understand the bigger aspect of whatever deeds you are doing. Deyam Dina Janaya Javita. I think we need to practice this. These should be our core tenets in life. Swadhyayam, self-reflection, knowing the self, the path and progress towards knowing the self, and constant connect with that higher self, association with good people who will help us in life towards growth, as well as compassionate and charitable giving and living. These are the 4 tenets, 4 ways that Bhajagovindam says. And with this you are always singing and praising Govinda. That's what Acharya Swami says. With this we will stop here. I will take some questions at the end. We have 4 more slokas. Mostly we will finish it in the next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarva Buddhyatmanava Prakriti Swabhavat Karomi Yat Sagalam Parismai. Narayanayi Samarpayami Sarvam Narayanayi Samarpayami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.